I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. We have a very special guest today, Nat Philbrick, who really needs no introduction, but he is Nantucket's resident historical writer, for lack of a better term. Thank you for coming. And I know you just come off a long book tour for your Valiant Ambition,
right?
Which is the second of a trilogy about the Revolutionary War, the first having been Bunker Hill.
Right.
Valiant Ambition is about a very complex relationship between George Washington and Benedict Arnold, and then Benedict Arnold's relationship with other people.
Right.
How did you come out feeling about Benedict Arnold when everything was done?
Well, you know, it was, while I was writing it, it was one of those things, come on, Benedict, you know, just hold it together. Because he was a man of infinite potential. He was brilliant militarily, passionate when channeled in a good way, charismatic, and exactly what the American forces needed. But, you know, he was kind of like Nixon. He was his own worst enemy. And so this book, more than any book I've worked on, really taught me that, yes, character is destiny. That yes, there were forces that contributed to Benedict going the dark way, but ultimately it was inside him what led him that way. I mean, it's very interesting, the difference between Washington and Arnold, where Arnold, you know, it was Arnold that ultimately mattered to him. And with Washington, he was one of those extraordinary people who ultimately felt that there were things larger than his own interests that he was most responsible for.
If there was a criticism of the book at all, and there were very few, it was that you sort of left Arnold hanging at the end of the book.
Yeah, because I have another book to write, and that's purposeful. And you know, I wanted to tell people at the end of the book there was another book. The publisher didn't, and I can understand why. And I purposefully didn't want to go into it because the next book begins with, you know, you could argue that he was not only the best general on the American side, he was the best general on the British side, because
sides.
now he's a brigadier general. The next book will really begin with him heading south to Virginia, where he just burns Richmond and has his way. And I think you can argue it was really a bad move on the British part, because there was no one more hated in America than Benedict Arnold in the winter of 1780, 1781. And by sending him down there, you know, what you unleash in just a year's time will be Yorktown. Washington sends the person he really regards as his surrogate son, Lafayette, after Arnold. And
didn't Arnold end up in England before Yorktown?
Nope. He went almost immediately from New York, where, you know, he was for a couple of months. He was sent to Virginia, and so and then after ransacking Virginia, he is extracted. We almost had a pre-Yorktown. The French were down there, had a fleet headed down in an attempt to capture him. The British were also sent a fleet. There was a battle. The British prevailed in that case, and Arnold was able to escape. And you know, and Arnold being Arnold, what does he do? Just as all the rest of the nation is focusing at Yorktown, he goes to New London, Connecticut, and basically burns that city to the ground.
Fort Griswold.
Yes, and you know, which is one of the scenes of the worst massacres in the Revolution. And you know, you go to New London or anywhere in Connecticut today, and I did on book tour, and Arnold is still remembered. I talked to one woman who is descended from a family that lost 5 of their 6 sons in that battle.
Wow.
And yeah, it's so he was a real lightning rod.
So does the third book focus on him as well?
It doesn't really focus on him. He is, who it focuses on is Washington, because, you know, after, this is my third book, and he is really the reason
The third book in this series.
In the series, yeah.
The trilogy.
Yeah. But this will end it. And I was just fascinated by Washington. I grew up kind of bored by the thought of him. You know, we all looked at him on the $1 bill. He's a statue without many emotions. And there's stuff in there that it's very hard to get at, because for one thing, the evidence isn't really there. You know, all his letters to Martha were burned, and you know, he was very careful at maintaining a public persona. but anyone who knew him was very aware of incredible emotions that he had managed to mostly control. And you know, for 6 years of the revolution, he doesn't get to go home, and it's only on his way to Yorktown that he stops at Mount Vernon for the first time in 6 years. And it's very interesting that battle, which he didn't want to fight, he wanted it to all end in New York, which was the scene of his initial disgrace in 1776. He didn't want to do it, but the French did, so it's against his will, and yet it brings him home. And so it's a very interesting, personal as well as, obviously much bigger forces involved.
What's the third one going to be entitled? Do you have a name yet?
We're working on it. I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, it's going to be, I'm known for maritime topics, and this will really focus on a sea battle, the Battle of the Chesapeake between the French and the British that preceded Yorktown. Made that battle a fait accompli. And I don't think most Americans are aware, in fact, I don't think we want to be aware, that the revolution was won not by anything really Americans did, but a battle fought in which we really didn't participate, that set up what would become...
Between the French and the British.
Between the French and the British. And so it's a very interesting story that I think will be full of surprises for a lot of readers.
My daughter lives in northwest Arkansas, and very near a site of the Battle of Pea Ridge, which is a battle that nobody's ever heard of in the Civil War.
Right.
But it was a key battle in keeping the South out of Missouri and enabling Missouri then to send troops to help the Army of the Potomac. A different war, a different era, but it's interesting how there are these key things.
Yeah, and I think Officer Benteen was there, who would then fight in Battle of Little Bighorn.
Right.
But it was an incredible battle. But you're right. Most people, it's just off the radar. It wasn't.
And it's supposedly, just as an aside, the best preserved Civil War battlefield anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the same thing was true with Arnold. The Battle of Saratoga is not a battle a lot of people know much about or really view as a key turning point almost in the Revolutionary War.
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of typical of Arnold because he was there and you could argue was more responsible than anyone else for a victory. A lot of people, it just doesn't quite fit, but it was absolutely key. And the British gentleman Johnny Burgoyne was working his way down from Canada. And ultimately what he ran into was the American wilderness. He couldn't keep a supply train leading all the way back to Canada. His men were starving, and the only way he was going to get out was to punch through to Albany, take it, and link up with the British in New York. And Arnold was there and fought very heroically, had his left leg hit by a musket ball, multiple fractures, and it would be more than a year before he could walk again. And but it was this victory that brought in the French, and it's absolutely key.
I was interested to read that there's a monument at Saratoga. There's also a wall at West Point, I guess, of generals who fought in the Revolution. And in both cases, Arnold is acknowledged, but without his name.
His name is not there, but and the Saratoga one is amazing because it's right at the scene where he was injured. And it's a boot, and and I remember I went there when I was a little kid, and my father explained that it was if that had been shot off, it would have been the only loyal part of Arnold, and so it's a fitting monument.